Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Code Blue, dedicated to all things unidentified, brought to you by bluebook.tv, the platform of the Unexplained. Please check it out. It's free. I am Thor, and thank you for listening. The topic of this episode: UFOs and nuclear weapons. The correlation between unidentified aerial phenomena and the history of nuclear weapons is curious and full of intrigue and can be construed as both terrifying and hopeful. Set aside the presence of high levels of irradiated isotopes on Mars, including xenon-129, krypton, and UTH, only explainable by a thermonuclear reaction. And let's remind us those isotopes have only been seen on Earth's atmosphere since 1945. They suggest a nuclear explosion on Mars in the distant past, according to scientist and author J.E. Brandenburg. The shelf life of these isotopes is somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 million years. Also, set aside the theories by many, including Russian physicist and mathematician M. Agrest, that Sodoma and Gomorrah were nuked over 5,000 years ago, evident not only by the Old Testament description of heat, melt, and exposed humans turning to dust, but modern evidence of glazed silicon permutation in layers at the bottom of the Dead Sea, consistent with modern-day nuclear explosions. Instead, let's focus on modern times, where eyewitnesses are providing accounts of events that have taken place during the era of nuclear energy, nuclear technology, and nuclear weapons, in particular during the Cold War. The most documented event took place at Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana in March of 1967, where armed nuclear missiles await in bunker silos underground in multiples of 10 to be launched at a minute's notice. Robert Salas was on duty that day as an Air Force captain and launch officer responsible for guarding and ensuring launch, if necessary, of 10 intercontinental ballistic nuclear missiles, each carrying the explosive power of 810 kilotons. For comparison, Hiroshima's nuclear bomb was 15 kiloton, a mere 2% of the magnitude of Salas' responsibility. For perspective, 10 missiles under his command represented 500 times the power of Hiroshima. On the night of March 24, in a bunker 50 feet underground, Salas received a message that a glowing red object was hovering above the front gate, and moments later, a red flashing light indicated, one after another, that all 10 missiles were going offline. They become inoperable, completely disabled. Robert Salas thought they were under some kind of attack. The minutes that followed were terrifying, but nothing happened. Later, the red glowing object left its position at the front gate, and soon thereafter, the weapons could be recycled back online. When the incident was reported internally, Salas discovered that an identical event had taken place a week earlier. Many servicemen, eyewitnesses to these events, have come forward, including 7 of Robert's fellow servicemen at a National Press Club event in September of 2010, including Captain Robert Jameson, Missile Targeting Officer, Jerome Nelson, Missile Launch Officer, Colonel Dwin Anderson, Communications Center Officer, and Captain Robert Salas himself, Missile Launch Officer, along with Colonel Charles Holt, Deputy Space Commander at Bentwater, England, and Bruce Fenstermacher, his Missile Launch Officer, accounting for similar events on the other side of the Atlantic. Robert Hastings, researcher and author of UFOs and Nukes, arguably the greatest authority on this subject, made the event possible. Attempts have been made including by the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry, to debunk the story, stating that there were two offline incidents at Malmstrom, a week apart, on March 16 and 24 in 1967, due to power anomalies, failing to mention that the above lifelong servicemen were eyewitnesses at the site. Some saw the red glowing light with their own eyes, while others witnessed the correlating events, including the nuclear shutdown from the bunker, and all signed an affidavit to the truthfulness of their testimony. Nuclear power plants and institutions have had outages correlating with sightings of unidentified aerial phenomena as well. Most famous is perhaps the Bariloche, Argentina incident of the mid-90s, witnessed by over 100 passengers and a crew of an airliner who saw lights parked above the Bariloche island, home to a government-run secret nuclear fission research facility. The USS Nimitz, a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, has multiple support ships accompanying it, including submarines powered by nuclear energy, as well as carrying armed nuclear missiles. It was during an exercise in the Pacific, off the coast of California in 2004, involving the USS Nimitz, that a TikTok drone intentionally engaged in a now famous video. Let's also remember that Roswell is a skip and a hop from Alamogordo, the first nuclear test site on Earth. Further, Idaho has seen more than its fair share of UAPs, especially during the period of nuclear testing from the 1950s through the 70s. They are, after all, downwind from Nevada. And Nevada itself has seen more nuclear testing than most other states, including at Mercury, Nevada, a U.S. Atomic Energy Commission's proving ground for nuclear testing, dating back to 1955, when 14 A-bombs were detonated as part of Operation Teapot, witnessed by thousands of military personnel parked in trenches at questionably safe distance. Over a dozen operating personnel have since come forward stating that other observers were present, specifically, in their own words, flying saucers, hovering and observing the test explosions every time. A most peculiar incident took place more recently, on March 29, 2018, over the Pacific Ocean after a successful routine launch of an ICBM test missile from Vandenberg Air Force Base. The missile experienced a catastrophic failure at 4:42 a.m. somewhere over the Pacific. Air Force Global Strike Command stated the flight was safely terminated at that time due to an anomaly, but to the Air Force, an anomaly can be any unexpected event during a test. And unexpected it was. Eyewitnesses, including Air Force launch staff, MCCAs, missile combat crews, including U.S. Air Force Lieutenant Robert Jacobs, who like others were sworn to secrecy, that they saw nothing and heard nothing and would never speak of it again. But about halfway off the target distance of 4,200 miles, destination somewhere in the Kwajalein Atoll of the Marshall Islands, an object appeared next to the missile and resumed to shoot what looked like a laser beam at the tip of the missile from 3 different 90-degree angles, and then finished off with a 4th laser beam straight into the burning fuel end of the rocket. The missile spun out of control and fell into the ocean. All these stories, corroborated by multiple eyewitness accounts, civil and military, are similar in nature, yet distant in time and space. Collectively, they correlate a narrative of control, of demonstrated takeover ability, disabling of our nuclear arsenal, and messaging to Central Command of those capabilities. As a result, it is logical to conclude at minimum that our nuclear energy and weapons greatly concern the other intelligences present on Earth. They intensely observe testing, monitor radiation fallouts at test sites, as they did at the Fukushima power plant. They don't like, seemingly, or trust our handling of nuclear science and communicate with their actions to us, hey, we can take control of this at a moment's notice. And if we look ourselves in the mirror, honestly and intelligently, while we don't have technology to contain radiation, to neutralize nuclear waste, to disable wayward nuclear weapons, or protocols to safely shut down failing power plants, perhaps we, the children of Earth, are not ready to play with such powerful matches. Aside from the obvious existential threat to ourselves and all life forms on this planet, should nuclear weapons be used, at this time we can only speculate what other, bigger concerns might exist just over the horizon, oblivious to us, for the fabric of the universe.